And we're back. Welcome to another fantastic episode of Wildlife Cake and Cocktails. My name is Yanni Torcola. We got an excellent show for you guys tonight. We're talking reptile conservation on Christmas Island. One of our guests today you may know from previous episodes. It's Hamish Noller, reptile enthusiast, snake catcher, breeder, and also recent UQ Wildlife Science graduate. Now, having finished up his undergrad at the end of 2017, Hamish is on some pretty cool projects lined up. The first being this current trip to Christmas Island in the Indian Ocean, 1,500 kilometres northwest of the mainland of Australia. That's around 350 kilometres south of Java, Indonesia. It's a very unique environment with 135 plant species, 18 of which are endemic. Dense rainforests of pandanus, palm trees, ferns, figs, vines, and aspens grow on the deep soil terraces on the inland. And there's marginal woodlands, grasses, shrublands, coastal mangrove systems. There's also rare and endemic land and seabirds, small mammals, and of course the famous Christmas Island red crab migrations. There's also some very cool reptiles there, including the Christmas Island blue-tailed skink, Cryptoblepharus aegariae, which is unfortunately extinct in the wild. Hamish is lucky enough to currently be over helping build Swell Lodge, an amazing ecotourism lodge in the national park. You can check them out at swelllodge.com.au. But he's also taking some time to volunteer with the Parks and Wildlife Cryptoblepharus aegariae breeding program. Previously, the only known population that we currently had with another one recently up at Taronga Zoo, I believe. We're also very lucky to be joined by Mr. Jason Turl, Ranger at Parks Australia, also helping a little with the blue tail conservation and a very knowledgeable man about Christmas Island ecology in general. You can check him out at Wildside Australia on Facebook, Twitter, and all the usual social media outlets. Guys, thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedule to chat with us tonight. This is excellent. How are you guys doing?
Yeah, good mate. Good mate. How are you?
Very, very well. We've been having a bit of a sweltering day here in the last few days here in Brisbane. How's the weather up there on the island? Nice and tropical?
Well, yeah. I mean, the temperature doesn't really change much throughout the year. It's pretty much steady between 26 and 28. Although it is very, very humid. I think it's around 95% humidity on average.
Yeah, when you get to the wet season, which is this time of year in the tropics, we get a couple of days of 100%, which is good fun.
So it's wow. Well, we just sweat a lot.
All right. So where are you guys right now? Where are we talking to you from?
So we're at Jason's place. We're just sitting out the back having a couple of beers. It's a bit earlier here than it is over your way. I think it's about 5 o'clock, 5:15 over here. So sun's still up, sky's blue. It's a nice day.
Wonderful. And you guys have a bit of cake and some beverages there waiting for you, ready to go?
We do.
Of course.
I had a very haphazard couple of cupcakes that I threw in the oven just before coming here and after volunteering with the skinks today.
Yeah, of course. Well, look, in honour of our discussion tonight, I'm drinking a Blue Island iced tea. It's a close cousin of the Long Island iced tea, but it is, it's a beautiful sky blue. That being said, it's vodka, gin, light rum, gold tequila, blue curacao, and sour mix. So
Are you going to get a podcast?
I'm going to try, but it might get a bit slurry. Who knows? I've also got a nice slice of salted caramel chocolate slice, so I'm ready to roll, man. Yeah. So, guys, look, hopefully it's not all work for you guys. Hamish, we see on your Instagram quite a few awesome photos of diving with lionfish, sharks, amazing jellyfish. Or you can see on Hamish's Instagram at HamWildo, even an injured frigate bird that you guys recently encountered. Is that correct?
Yeah, the island is full of surprises and lots of weird and wonderful things. So we go snorkeling most mornings. We're up at sunrise and in the water.
Wow.
And pretty much, yeah, it never fails to amaze me, the things we see in the water here. It's always good fun.
Yeah, right. And so I saw you swimming with a nice, was it some kind of reef shark at some point as well?
It was a silky shark.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, they're pretty common around the island here. We see a fair few of them. So the few silkies and big GTs at this one spot around the island. And, we jumped off the boat, went for a swim, and we're lucky enough to get pretty close to, about 5 sharks and a dozen or so big trevally.
Wow.
It was very
fantastic. And Jason, do you get a lot of time off to get a bit of diving in as well, or pretty busy there most of the time?
We definitely keep really busy, but we try and finish up about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. You've got a few hours of light. It's probably only 5 minutes into the water. So yeah, I'm a spear fisherman, and I dive a lot and explore caves and spend most of the afternoons doing that sort of thing. It's just that kind of lifestyle here.
So between working on endemic, unique wildlife and their conservation and this amazing national park, you're basically splashing around in the ocean and going exploring.
Yeah, that's it. It's an exploring type of island, that's for sure.
I can definitely to that. I've been exploring more in the last month than I have been, I think, probably in my whole life. It's like every single day I'm seeing something new and something cool.
and that's Hamish as well, and that's between working on Swell Eco Lodge as well to help everybody else come out there and do their adventuring as well, correct?
Yeah, that's it. Luckily for me, the couple that are building Swell Lodge, two of my friends, Chris and Jess, are a very adventure-orientated couple. So there's really no getting out of it. I'm going adventuring every day, whether I like it or not, because that's what they do. So yeah, I'm just tagging along.
And you can obviously you can tell that from their photos on Instagram at Swell Lodge as well. They're definitely into the adventure life out there as well. It looks just like an absolutely fantastic place. Guys, well, let's talk Christmas Island. So out there, 1,500 kilometres northwest of the Australian mainland. It's about 135 kilometres squared, with a central plateau formed from volcanic activity in the late Eocene, I believe, around 35 million years ago. Edged with steep limestone cliffs and terraces and slopes. It's mostly national park, about 60% of the land area, with phosphate mining leases making up around 25%, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's about it. So the phosphate mine is actually the reason that any of us are here, basically. I think, was it the 1950s or so that the phosphate mine was opened? And yeah, basically that's sort of what kicked off. There are no sort of native humanoids living here. It's all people that came over for the mine, and it's still operating. And that's probably been the primary source of income and jobs for most of the people here.
Right. There's the current population of about 1,800 people or so.
Yeah, I think it's a bit more, 2,500 or so.
It was a little bit more just only probably a year or so ago, maybe two, but it's dropping down quite dramatically now, and I think there's probably even less than that here now, so probably around 1,500 at the moment.
Oh wow.
And it's actually standing on the island at the moment.
Wow, so it fluctuates a lot. Wow, that's interesting.
Yeah, it does.
The mine has been operating for quite a long time, and they did recently apply for permits to explore more of the island, and then with obviously the hope that they were going to get more area to mine, but that was not approved. So the mine is, I mean, people have been saying that it's on its last legs for quite a long time now, and it's it's still going, but it probably is nearing the end of its life cycle here on Christmas Island.
Right. So I guess the future of the island looks a little bit more towards ecotourism, I guess. Yeah,
definitely. The primary source of income has been both the mine and the detention centre. Obviously, upkeep and staff have provided a lot of jobs, but that also is sort of on the decline. And I mean, it's hard to say exactly when, but in the
near,
looks
to be shutting down. Yeah.
They're probably gonna close at some point. And yeah, I mean, the island, its primary resource is just the environment and the animals here. So certainly, ecotourism is a definite and hopeful sort of option for the island's future here.
Yeah, right. And look, I mean, as we say, it is a very unique and amazing environment that you have there. Jason, first of all, how long have you been there? And I guess in that time, how much of the island have you actually managed to see?
I've been here for just over 4 years now, and I've been working with the national parks the whole time. I've been really lucky, I suppose, getting a lot of friends that are, quite loving exploring and stuff like that as well, and I jumped straight into it when I got here. I think I was here on a Saturday, and by the Monday I already had 4 scuba dives under my belt, I think, when I first arrived. But some people would argue that I've seen more of the island than most. Probably one of the reasons for that is because in 2014, the end of 2014, myself and 2 other people were the first to circumnavigate the island on foot.
Oh, wow.
And we saw a lot of places there that people haven't seen before, and discovered a few new caves, and that was sort of gone down as a little bit of knowing the island, I'd say.
Wow, so like you really and truly know the island quite intimately then, I guess. Despite, I mean, circumnavigating it on foot, was there some areas that are still sort of impossible or that can't yet or haven't yet been accessed by people, or?
Nothing's impossible. However, I think the main thing is, well, any adventurer will tell you that, but I think the main thing is with the island being sort of a honeycomb of caves, new ones and old ones are sort of closing and opening all the time. So even just, in the retrospective of cave formations, I myself have seen a very, very large cave close over and a very, very large one open up just in my time here.
What, just in your 4 years there?
Yeah. So, and that was only in the space of a couple of months, basically. Just, there was some sort of tremor, which we didn't feel on the surface. And when I went back into the cave to check it out for a third time, that was one was closed off and a new area was opened up. And not talking small areas here, I'm talking probably the size of a 2-story house.
Wow, that's incredible. Well, look, as we mentioned, the island itself is formed from volcanic activity. Is it the Christmas Island Sea Ridge, or anyway, there's a large underwater volcanic ridge basically that Christmas Island is basically just the tip of. So there's a whole lot of volcanic activity underneath you.
Yeah, it definitely is a lot of fun in the water. As I said, we spend a lot of time in the water because the drop off here that goes into stupidly deep water. You go 100 meters offshore and you can be in kilometers deep water just by snorkeling off the shore.
I can vouch for that. I've been swimming like you get like 40 meters off and then suddenly you look down and there's just a vertical wall below you and you just can't see the bottom at all.
Wow,
it's
so
pretty.
You're kind of over the abyss pretty quickly.
Yeah, definitely.
And it's great fun, and that's what brings in a lot of cool creatures as well. I mean, not many places in the world where you can just sort of snorkel off the beach very closely and swim with manta rays and whale sharks and marlin and sailfish and different pelagic sharks and all that sort of stuff.
Right. So obviously, it's not just the terrestrial fauna that is of interest around the island. There's all that amazing marine diversity, particularly I guess with all those volcanic seamounts and things underneath the ocean, providing structure and habitat.
Yeah, there's some very, very cool marine life here. I mean, apart from the reef fish, which are obviously spectacular, probably some notable ones, obviously the manta rays and the whale sharks. They both come in, and Christmas Island is quite well known for the whale sharks at this time of year, although sort of we're just getting to the end of the season now. But also things like sunfish, stuff like that. We have one sort of resident tiger shark that cruises around, a lot of other sharks as well, yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. Wow, it's great to hear that you guys are getting to have so much time in the sea. I'm always super jealous of that. Guys, I guess, Hamish, I wanted to ask, since you're a bit newer to the island, can you tell us your first impressions of what it was like arriving there?
So I've been here for a bit over 3 weeks now, and sort of part of it feels like I've just arrived and the other part feels like I've been here forever. The first few days were interesting, just sort of trying to come to grips with what the island was and where everything was. The majority of the island is sort of just surrounded by sheer cliffs. There's not a lot of beaches, and the few that are they're very, very narrow, sort of large coral rather than sand. Right, so it rises up out of the ocean pretty quickly. Yeah, it's almost got a Jurassic Park kind of feel. Like it's very, very jagged and raw, and yeah, you're really just out in the middle of the ocean. Not to mention that the wildlife here is so unique and often quite bizarre that it really, you just get this sense of you're just in a completely different world out here. You're so isolated from everything else. It's a pretty special place. And I've talked to a lot of people, and I've felt the same way from the first few days, that you just kind of come here and I don't know, it's something special about it. Like you kind of just feel at home here. It's really interesting. It's a really interesting place. I can't think of many places that I felt more comfortable as quickly as I did here. You really just kind of slot into island life. It's very cruisy. There's not a lot of phone reception or internet, which is awesome. You kind of just settle into this really nice lifestyle of island life.
Yeah, right. So your internal clock switched onto island time pretty quickly by the sound
Absolutely.
of it.
Yeah, it didn't take long at all. I think it was a day or two. So I'm leaving. I've only got another week and a bit here, but I will definitely be back. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah, wonderful. Oh, I guess we're hearing the sounds of chicken coop construction in the background.
Yeah, we've got our neighbour building. Just ignore that.
That's all right. Such is life when you're Skyping in to a wildlife podcast from a remote island in the middle of the ocean. Jason, I guess with Hamish being getting used to life on the island. Can you tell us a bit about having been there for so long, what the environment is like and what life on the island is like day to day?
Well, the environment is really, really different to really anywhere, like in Australia especially, because most people have heard of the red crab migration, the Great Red Crab Migration, and that's basically what shapes the environment here. So when you walk through the forest, you don't get sort of the lower understory that most people are used to when they walk through a tropical rainforest, whether it be sort of in North Queensland or places like that. It's very clear that the ground is just dirt with crab burrows, and they sort of clean it all up, and that's the sort of ecology that we have here. But when you go for a bushwalk, you love it because it's just easy to walk through the forest here in that sense, as long as you can avoid the rocks and the pinnacles. So that's definitely right.
That was definitely one of the first things I noticed here as soon as I went into the rainforest. Is you go into these healthy areas and it is just there's no leaf litter anywhere. It's big trees, roots, and just clean soil. There's absolutely.
Yeah, that's what I heard. It looks like it's been raked and very well maintained, like somebody's kind of personal garden, because you've got these. Not just the red crabs, but a couple of other species of crabs running around, being the main like detritivores and leaf eaters, doing a lot of really important soil turnover.
So there's the red crabs, blue crabs, and the robber crabs are sort of the primary three large crabs that you will see running around the forest floor. The red and the blues are pretty similar in shape and size, apart from the colour, obviously. And then you've got robber crabs, which are quite large. But they will also eat other things. So if you find a dead red or a blue crab that might have been squished by a passing car, the robbers will often clean them up. They nest up quite high in the trees, and the young Abbott's boobies, if they fall out of the nest, the robber crabs will even come and take those. So the robber crabs definitely.
They'll take Abbott's boobies.
They will, yeah. The chicks, once they fall down, if they can't get back up to the nest, which they often can't due to the dense canopy, the robber crabs will even come and take those. So between those three species, the whole place is kept pretty clean. And then there's another 17 species on top of that, but a lot of them are much smaller, often in the ocean, other places like that.
Yeah, right. Littoral crabs and rock-dwelling crabs and things like that. Okay, but well, look, I guess we should, talk about some of the endemic species under threat. That's what we're here to talk about in the end. So look, Christmas Island, home to some really, really cool species such as the Christmas Island hawk owl, Christmas Island shrew, and as we were talking about, the famous Christmas Island red crab, Geocardia natalis, which used to be up in population numbers of around over 43 million. Some 15 million of them were killed by a yellow crazy ant at some point recently, I believe.
It sort of comes down to, sorry to butt in there, it sort of comes down to the yellow crazy ants taking a lot of the baby crabs and the return of the crabs, as well as forming their ant nests, their colonies, their super colonies in amongst nice crab areas and nice pristine forest. And that's what's taking down the numbers. So they're kind of thinking at the moment that it's around the 45 million mark.
Wow. Jesus. So hopefully, they're going to be getting some kind of handle on those crazy ants at some point, because obviously there's some risks to a lot of the other species there, apparently. From what I understand, anyway.
Risk to a lot, most of the larger species, the crazy ants have managed to push out. But we can, I think we'll definitely go over that a bit later in the podcast, because Jason actually happens to be his main jobs for parks at the moment is dealing with crazy ants and some of the potential ways that we can try to control their population and their spread. So it'll be a worthwhile topic to save for some point.
Oh, no, we'll definitely be discussing that. That sounds fantastic. But for now, I guess I just want to talk, obviously, as I always do, reptiles, which there's some pretty cool endemic and threatened reptiles on the island, such as the Christmas Island blind snake, Rhamphotiphylox exoceti, which is vulnerable, Lister's gecko, Lepidactylus listeri, and the aforementioned Christmas Island blue-tailed skink, which is extinct in the wild. Now, there's also the Christmas Island forest skink, which was listed as extinct in 2017, with the last individual gump having died in 2014. So, are we expecting to see some more extinctions on the way?
I hope not.
No, we're hoping not, that's for sure.
not if we can do anything about it.
It was a very sad day when we lost poor Gump.
Yeah. Oh, so you? Oh, wow, that was only 4 years ago. You would have
I was here.
almost been around for that.
I was here for that. I was actually one of the last people to get a nice photo of poor little Gump before she passed a couple of weeks after.
Oh man, that's heartbreaking.
Mm.
So when they did the initial sort of feasibility studies and went out to capture specimens for captive breeding back in late 2009, only 4 of the forest skinks were found, and unfortunately all 4 were female. So
so they couldn't get a breeding program going with all females, obviously.
No,
so even Gump was a young lady.
Yep.
Yes.
I think 1 or 2 may have came in with eggs, but they weren't viable, unfortunately.
Right. And in that Amoya genus, there's also the coastal skink as well, which is exists on other islands, but is extinct from Christmas Island. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. Unfortunately, again, it's one of those ones that sort of slips under the radar a little bit with our breeding programs with the blue tails and the listers gecko. But yeah, unfortunately that's another one that's fallen.
Yeah. Right. Wow. And tough stuff. A lot of this is, as we mentioned, due to introduced species, or we suspect is due to introduced species on Christmas Island, such as feral cats and the Asian wolf snake, Lycodon capucinus. The Brahminy blind snake is also there, Rhamphotiphyllus brahminus, which is basically everywhere in the world.
It's the snake, yeah.
Yeah, the little flower pot snake that just gets moved around in soil. The giant centipede, Solenopendra subspinipes, and the yellow crazy ant, as we mentioned, Anaplolepis gracilipes. I understand there's also 2 invasive gecko species, is that correct?
There is, yeah. So there's the Asian house gecko, which is pretty common back on the mainland in Australia, which over here they actually call the barking gecko. And then there's another introduced species which over here is known as the Asian house gecko, but it's a different one to what we have back on the mainland.
Okay. That's not the other house gecko that's recently been established north of Sydney, is it? Oh, God. I forget the species name.
Maybe it is. Maybe both of them are on the mainland now.
Not too sure. Is it Hemidactylus or is it?
It's a Hemidactylus. I just don't remember for the life of me, I don't remember the species name. Anyway, moving on. Wow, that's pretty tough stuff. There's both competition and predators for a lot of these animals to deal with. So
yeah,
for example, with the blue-tailed skinks, there's other lizards on the island, and there's the Asian wolf snake, which is a fairly powerful predator of small lizards, as I understand. And then you've got the yellow crazy ant. That's a lot to deal with.
The centipede is actually probably one of the main threats to the skinks and geckos. The centipede is actually like probably the main threat, according to some of the parks guys that I was speaking to today. They are in absolute plague proportions here. They were so they've been setting up some soft release sites for the breeding program for the blue-tailed skinks. There was one area with a perimeter of 250 meters, so this is not a large area. And from that area, they removed 400 centipedes.
What?
just to give you an idea of how many are here. So you start to look at that over
400 giant centipedes.
400 giant centipedes from a 250, an area with a 250 meter perimeter.
And that was just mostly doing sort of nocturnal checks and catching by hand. So that was, we had a few drop traps.
So that was by active searching, not by like setting up some kind of centipede pitfall.
We had a few pitfalls in there, but they weren't as successful as some pitfalls should be, because it was difficult terrain to sort of put them in. But we got quite a few in that. But yeah, it was a lot of active searching was where we got big numbers from.
Wow, feet on the ground, head torches on, looking for centipedes to help protect the local lizard population.
Yeah, plus we also wanted to get the ideas of the ones trying to get into the soft release site. So we'd constantly do perimeter checks before the night search, or just before the night search, and you'd have the wolf snakes and the centipedes pushing up against the fence a lot of the time there.
Yeah, wow. Are the wolf snakes in big numbers there as well, or nothing compared to the centipede?
They're nothing compared to a centipede, probably because of the breeding cycle. But the hard thing was, for especially for park staff and any sort of researcher, was to come over and sort of track how centipedes have covered the island. Whereas the wolf snake, we could kind of see as they spread to the furthest part of the island, we saw the extinction of the reptiles kind of follow that trend.
Right. Okay. So you pretty directly kind of correlate it when you're seeing that front.
It's minimal data, because I mean, you're talking even before the 90s, I suppose, that people only came here on very, very short stints trying to name species and to describe, and it didn't really sort of come out as good as a PhD would these days.
Right. All right. Well, and what about Anoplolepes gracilipes, the yellow crazy ant? What kind of impact are they having on local reptiles, as far as we know?
Well, it's a tough one, because I mean, most reptile lovers out there would sort of know if you find ants, you're not going to find reptiles. That's usually a small rule of thumb. But
these ants spray acid, so that particularly applies here.
They spray formic acid, and they're arboreal, and they'll nest pretty much anywhere. But they create these super colonies with multiple queens, and it's basically, if you sort of stand there for 10 seconds, you'll have ants up to your neck pretty much very, very fast. But the main thing that ants have done here is they destroy everything. But because they destroy, like I said before, the red crabs and the land crabs here sort of shape the ecosystem. When they wipe them out, they change the entire ecosystem all the way up to the Abbott's booby, which nests in a 50 to 80 metre tree. Those trees are not going to grow when you haven't got the crabs there clearing the forest floor. So the ants are basically destroy that whole sort of habitat side of it as well.
By destroying that keystone species for the forest systems.
Exactly, and creating that domino effect for pretty much all the species on the island. You can almost link everything back to the yellow crazy ants. They are classified as the biggest priority here at the moment.
Wow. Okay. And so, what kind of control measures are you guys at least attempting at the moment?
Well, it's very exciting. There's been over a decade of research got into a biological control, and so what we've done, probably not many people have actually heard of this outside the scientific world, but it'll be, I think, one of the first places that we have a biological control for a native environment on an entire island, especially at 135 square kilometres. It's quite a large project. But we introduced the agent just over a year ago now. I think it was maybe January last year. And it's a micro wasp. And what it does is it attacks the food source of the ant and it kills that by laying its eggs in it. So it's indirectly having an effect to stop these super colonies getting created by the ants. And they feed on a lacting scale, which excretes a sugary dew. And the ants sort of harvest that and farm it, and they get hepped up and make these super colonies out of that by farming this. So we're indirectly attacking their food source and hopefully getting the numbers down to a manageable level where the crabs can move through without being killed.
And it's sort of important to understand that for these ants to go from a colony to a super colony, they need huge amounts of sugar. So by them farming these hard scale insects and creating sort of more sugar than would naturally be occurring in the environment, they're able to basically engineer their own food source so that they can create a super colony themselves. So without that excess sugar that they're creating, they basically go from a super colony back down to just a normal colony of ants. And then so that seems to be one of the best ways of controlling, not eradicating them, that's probably impossible at this point, but certainly controlling their species down to a more manageable level. That seems to be the most successful method so far.
Wow, that's fascinating. So the scale bug sugar extract. So there's a lot of insects that'll suck on plants and produce kind of a sugary excretion that is used by some other kind of commensal or partnering insect. So you're using the wasps to attack them. Now, are the wasps parasitoids of these things, or are they actually directly predating on them?
No, they're a parasitoid, and we do have other scale insects, lacting scales, and other parasitoid wasps as well. There's plenty of them on the island. It's very, very small. I suppose when we tell people that we're introducing a wasp, it sort of gets people a little bit up in arms. But this micro wasp fits in the 0 of a 20-cent piece, if that sort of gives you a bit of scale size. Pardon the pun.
Yeah, okay. So a couple of millimeters, basically.
Yeah,
that's...
All right. There is two types of scale insects here. There's the hard and the soft. So the wasp that's being introduced attacks the hard scale. There is a soft scale as well, and there is a native wasp that will parasitoid on the soft scale. The native wasp is not at the moment in anywhere near high enough levels to keep the scale insects under control if the ants did happen to switch. So that may be something that can be looked at in the future.
Okay, so you don't want to leave them with a potential food resource to keep going. Super colony on.
There's a potential second resource for them there, but I'm sure at some point we can sort of look into. Well, I don't know. Is there already research being done on that as well?
There's a little bit done. I myself have personally gone out and found this wasp and identified it, and also known the name the species that it breeds on. So there's plenty to do with that. Unfortunately, it's probably about 1.5 mil compared to 2 millimeters. It's small,
even smaller.
So the hardest thing about my sort of work with that is. When we're trying to release this wasp, and we have, like I said, we've released it a year ago now, just over a year ago, and trying to monitor these things and see the effect, as well as when we're breeding them up, trying to separate males and females is not an easy thing for such a small animal.
Yeah, no, that's completely understandable. I'm much more used to dealing with animals that I can quite easily hold in my hand at some stage. All right, guys. Look, aside from the introduced species, which obviously some massive issues there. How significant issues are habitat loss and degradation? I mean, from the mining stuff and just habitat loss and degradation in general. Is it a significant risk as well to a lot of these species?
Yeah, I mean, I guess mining at any point is going to have some detrimental effects to the native sort of habitat. Luckily here on Christmas Island, there is still a huge amount of landmass that is national park and is completely protected. And as I sort of mentioned before, the mine did sort of put in an application for further sort of exploratory mining. Yeah. So the way that I think that they were hoping that would work is that if they go out and explore the area, then it's no longer considered untouched, and therefore they can apply for more permits to mine that area. But because that mining application was denied, that seems to have hopefully sort of sealed the fate of the mine expanding any further than it currently has.
Right. So more than likely some more ecotourism and stuff on the way. And look, I hate to play devil's advocate here, but I guess what about the risks of ecotourism? How are they being managed on the island for a growing ecotourism industry and the potential impacts of bringing on more people?
At the moment, there isn't really much of an industry for ecotourism at all. At the moment, we have scuba diving here, which is primarily catering to German tourists. They seem to be very fond of the scuba diving over here. there's only really sort of one or two companies that offer any scuba diving. There's not a lot in terms of accommodation. There's very little in terms of sort of guided walks or anything like that. So at the moment, the ecotourism side is very, very much in its infancy. So the first real, I guess, deliberate ecotourism that is designed to be on land is Swell Lodge, which is the reason I'm here. And basically the way that we're trying to manage it is by being very selective about how we offer the island to tourists. So you can look sort of not too far north, up in Indonesia and Bali, where you've got a lot of tourism which caters to enormous numbers of people, and there's very sort of party culture. That is tourism. We're not looking for that down here. Basically, the island is like a very small, very delicate ecosystem that we need to be extremely careful about how we market and sell the island to sort of an ecotourism population. So basically, we're trying to look for tourism that is very high quality. So you're offering people a really unique experience, giving them access to animals and environments that they don't get to see anywhere else. And basically, they will be, like most tourists will come in small numbers, but it'll be very high quality and obviously at a higher price.
Right, so going quality over quantity to try to minimize the impacts, and also, so people get a better experience out of the island.
Yeah, exactly. So, and, because it is, it's not like the island is covered in casinos and bars and pubs and that kind of So I think at the moment it's almost like a blank slate for tourism, which is kind of exciting. A lot of the endemic species, although some are extinct, a lot of the species here are still very intact. I literally walk in front of our car to push crabs off the road. Like, there is no shortage of awesome animals that you can see here. So I feel like, it's really a blank slate for ecotourism, and it means that we can kind of start from a really good, positive point rather than having to sort of fix other problems first. We can really just start setting up really, really good, high-quality tourism. And also hopefully getting the image of the island back on track a bit, because obviously the detention centre had a bit of a negative impact on the, I don't know, I guess.
Well, on the tourism aspect of things, for sure, yeah.
And don't know much about the island, but they have seen about the detention centre on the news. So hopefully.
Hamish, can you repeat that last bit?
Yeah. So, sorry, there's a chicken going in the background. I don't know if that's what it was. Anyway.
No. Yeah, it's just cutting out.
Yeah. So basically, there's no sort of casinos and bars, so we've kind of got an open option to start some really good quality tourism here. There's a lot of endemic species that are very cool to see. So it's sort of exciting times to be able to start ecotourism from a fresh, clean slate. Yeah,
all right, dude. Very, very, very cool stuff. Guys, I guess we should move on to blue-tailed skinks. It's what we're here to talk about in the end. So firstly, guys, I guess, can you tell us a little bit about Cryptoblepharus aegariae, and what do they look like, and where do you find them on the island?
So
where did you previously find them on the island?
At the moment, nowhere except for a captive breeding colony here. So they're a small skink, I think, sort of adult size, maybe 60 to 70 millimeters from head to tail tip. They're sort of like a greyish sort of patterned colour from the head to the base of the tail, and then as the name suggests, from the tail of the cloaca onwards is an absolutely like iridescent blue. It's almost hard to fathom when you see these young skinks. The blue is a lot brighter in the young skinks when they first hatch, and it does get a bit duller as they get older, but it's a pretty impressive animal to see. It's quite beautiful.
Yeah, it's kind of like a really stunning azure turquoisey kind of. It's really hard to describe kind of exactly what kind of blue it is on some of them, particularly on some of the adults. I mean, beautiful things. For those of you on the East Coast, there's a couple of species of Cryptoblepharus, the same genus that the bluetail is in. Cryptoblepharus pulcher and virgatus, which are commonly called fence skinks. you'll see them on, upward standing fence posts with small cracks in them, and they can just slip right into a tiny crevice, just in a cracked telephone pylon or something like that. So they're very sort of dorsoventrally compressed, very kind of flattened skinks, but also very small. Often with, I think Virgatus has like 2 white lines along the back. Anyway, so imagine that, but with an amazing blue tail. Is that pretty much it?
Pretty much. Like, it's almost metallic. It's impressive, and luckily we have some photos that we can upload with this podcast for everyone to have a look at, so they can.
Oh, I'm so looking forward to seeing those. I'm very, very happy to see those. Thank you guys again. But I just can't believe some of the colours that they end up having, especially as you mentioned, might be a bit more vibrant in some of the juveniles, but even the adults are absolutely stunning.
Oh yeah, no, there's no point in these lizards' lives where they don't look very cool.
Yeah, cool, awesome. So anyway, onto the lizards themselves. In about the 1990s, scientists noticed populations declining fairly rapidly too. By about 2009, there was just one site on the island where they were still found. Up until that, they were previously abundant, as I understand. Is that right?
Yeah, it seems like they were pretty abundant up until that point.
Yeah,
agree with that?
they were. People remember who grew up on the island, remember them in their backyards back in the day. It was almost as common as the garden skink, which we do have here as an introduced species as well, a type of garden. But and the last place they were found was on if you ever see a photo of Christmas Island, it's shaped like a dog, and the back leg of the dog is the furthest point, and that was the last place that they were captured and they were seen.
No, they got pushed right out to the corner and then gone.
That's it. It was basically the last place they were seen was almost the furthest from the main point in town that you can get.
Yeah, wow. That's that sucks. So look, my understanding as we went through it, I thought the wolf snake and the yellow crazy ant were the most significant threats, but obviously the giant centipede is quite a massive threat. Is it all of these things kind of combined together that's causing so much pressure? Yeah,
that's generally the sense that everyone has. We all sort of think that it's always a combination, especially when they've all come sort of in those sort of times when we have very little conservation to sort of follow the species and that back in those days. So that's what we.
Not a lot of monitoring and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and also national parks wasn't really going here for a long period of time as well. We had a sort of natural custodian. I think it might have been in the 70s or something like that. But national parks, or 60s, 70s, I think it might have been. Yeah, and national parks didn't come along for a little while. So and then you could imagine. Trying to establish national parks in an area that was basically, discovered for mining is kind of...
Bit of a challenge.
Yeah, it would have been a bit of a challenge for the poor old back in the day, I think.
Yeah, to say the least. I mean, there's some other vested interests there that obviously might make a little bit more money than a national park on a remote island without a lot of established tourism.
Indeed.
All right, well, so onto the breeding program then, I guess. So as of 2009, when they were down to that single site, I believe Parks Australia collected and correct me here if I'm wrong. 64 blue-tailed skinks, 43 listers, geckos, and 3 forest skinks. But as we mentioned, all those forest skinks ended up being females, including Gump. That's the Emoia nativitatis. And there's currently over 1,000 blue-tailed and 900 lister skinks as of last year, I believe. Is that all correct? How's that sound?
Yeah. So basically, the 2008 there was a feasibility study done on the skinks to decide whether or not they could be bred in captivity successfully. And the lister's gecko at that point was they were thought it was extinct. So during 2009, that feasibility study was approved and the program was approved. Late 2009, 2010, they went out and started collecting from the wild. So I think those numbers might have been at some point, but the total number collected from the wild was 86 blue-tailed skinks, 56 listers, geckos, and the 4 female forest skinks.
Right. Okay. 86, 56, and 4 rather than my 64, 43, and 3.
Yeah.
Oh, it's not too
All
bad.
were collected over, it was over a period of time throughout.
Okay, so that's the final collection count for the breeding program.
Yeah, and that was done from late 2009 and all through 2010. So it was quite a long process to collect those animals.
There was still searches going on. Even my first year here in the start of 2014, we were still just sort of doing searches just in case. So there was still...
And trying to get as much genetic diversity into those breeding populations as possible, I imagine.
Yeah, well, that's it. There wasn't any seeing for a few years, but there was still the protocol to go out and because we need to make sure and spend a few nights out there. The park staff searching for the couple of years after that as well.
Right. Is genetic diversity in the breeding populations being pretty closely monitored, or?
It is, yeah, definitely. So basically, at this point of collection, during the feasibility study, I guess Perth Zoo was quite involved in the research, and they were obviously wanting to have a sort of security population there as well. But eventually, Taronga Zoo actually got the approval to have the security population established there. So half of the animals, half of that 86, half of the 56 were sent to Taronga for a backup breeding population. And so they still have those breeding populations there now.
Wow, so Taronga Zoo currently has...
Blue-tailed skinks, yeah.
And
from Christmas up.
Oh, so... Wow. So there's a second backup, I guess, security population.
Yeah, exactly. So there is two captive populations, one here on Christmas Island and one at Taronga Zoo. The end goal is sort of to return those individuals and the successive generations that have been bred at Taronga back here to Christmas Island, but when they will be returned and if they will be suitable for breeding is unknown at this stage.
Yeah, right. Interesting. Now, Hamish, I know you've been into reptile breeding a little bit as well. How does the I know you haven't been exactly in as large of a capacity, but how do your breeding experiences with snakes and such at home here compare to working with I would imagine a really amazing breeding program for one of the most threatened species that there is?
Yeah, so very, very different. The breeding program here is extremely different to any kind of breeding that I've done back on the mainland for several reasons. Number one, the sort of climate here for temperature and humidity is extremely stable. So all breeding here is done in completely ambient temperatures. There is no incubators, there's none of that. There is some humidity control given, but
you're not putting things in basically modified refrigerators and maintaining temperatures and humidities within a certain boundary.
No, there's none of that. There's no, panics in the middle of the day when we get a heat wave. There's none of that. It's all stable. So a lot of the anxiety that I went through trying to breed, especially the black-headed pythons, apparently isn't really an issue here, which sounds really nice because there's a lot of stress back on the mainland trying to breed species that aren't actually native to the area you're trying to breed them. But yeah, luckily here they're breeding the species in an area where they're naturally occurring or were naturally occurring. So basically it's pretty similar in terms of your mix of vermiculite and perlite for different species. So you're getting essentially you're breeding these animals in large outdoor enclosures. So they're just sort of living within their own environment. The eggs are collected.
And you're just kind of assisting the breeding populations and making sure that they have as much success as possible.
Essentially, yeah. So rather than just letting them sort of go at it and ending up with all sorts of weird genetic mutations possibly occurring when siblings are breeding because they're not able to leave a confined space. So the eggs are getting collected, artificially incubated, but without any sort of heat or temperature control, just in ambient temperatures. So the lister's incubation is 90 days, I believe, and the blue-tailed skink is 60 days. And at that stage, they are released into like a small enclosure, and then several months later, or after about 1 month, they're then released into larger enclosures. And then they reach sexual maturity about 1.5 years of age. and then they're released into larger, again, outdoor enclosures.
Right, and those are kind of the big outdoor sunning enclosures that you can see photos of online, kind of with a bit of shade cloth over the kind of edges and stuff. But,
yep. So the goal here on Christmas Island, at the moment we've got about 1,500 blue-tailed skinks, and the goal was to reach 5,000 by 2023. Yeah, so it's interesting because basically the difference between breeding them here and the breeding at Taronga is quite interesting. Basically, here we're getting extremely high success rates with very little sort of input into the eggs. Basically, we're just collecting...
Or effort.
sort of small amount of effort, but very high success rate. And the other interesting point is that we're getting a very even sex ratio, so about 50-50 male-female, whereas at Taronga, where they're using artificial incubation and humidity control, they're getting a skewed sex ratio. So even though it's not officially confirmed, it appears that the blue-tailed skinks are temperature-dependent sex determination.
Right, so sex determination being temperature-dependent, just like in crocodiles and in a bunch of other reptiles that we already know of, but has never been confirmed in this species?
Yeah, I mean, it's not confirmed to the point where they can say it outright. But
right.
Yeah,
they're just saying Taronga is having a sex ratio skew, and it's probably because of temperature.
Probably, yeah. I mean, it seems that way. You can't say it for sure, but it does seem to be that way, considering the results that we're getting between Taronga and here.
Wow, that's absolutely fascinating, and that's I guess it shows some of the advantages of not taking island animals off their island.
Basically, there is a few sort of issues like that, and especially when some of the considerations for the future of the species may involve setting up populations on Cocos Islands. Certainly, sort of throwing out some ideas like that are worth considering when moving them to new locations. It's definitely worth considering.
Yeah, right. As to whether or not they'll still be in a suitable environment for them to have, I mean...
a healthy population, essentially, yeah.
Yeah, healthy population, sex ratios as per normal. Ah, wow, interesting. So I guess, challenges to rewilding that come with these animals would include protecting from those centipedes and wolf snakes and stuff like that. But
yeah,
I wanted to ask about environmental challenges like habitat loss or mining, or even worse, climate change.
Well, obviously for any temperature-dependent sex determination species, climate change is going to be an issue. I think with, correct me if I'm wrong, warming temperatures, or for most TSD species, warming temperatures almost always produce more males. Is that right?
Oh, you've stumped me. I don't know that one off the top of my head.
I think higher temperatures usually leads to males.
Right, okay.
Which is obviously an issue when you've got a disproportionate amount of males, and especially if you've got more females than males, it's less of an issue. But if you've got more males than females, then yeah, you've got a bit of a breeding issue there.
Yeah, no, definitely. All right, interesting stuff, guys. Dude, we've been chatting here for nearly an hour. We're pretty much going to have to wrap it up very shortly. Dude, I guess final thoughts wise. This is always so very interesting talking about island ecosystems to me, because you've got these small and isolated ecosystems, so evolution can kind of happen in a bottle a little bit. You're reproductively isolated, so you get these cool, unique, and endemic species, but they're also adapting to such unique conditions on those islands. For example, there might not be as many predators, which means you don't have to be as predator averse. And then when introduced predators or some kind of change happens, basically what I'm saying is that you get this amazing, unique island speciation, but it comes with some kind of vulnerability to perturbations and change. Is that kind of the case that we're seeing?
Yeah, so there has been some research done basically looking at whether or not the reptiles are able to recognise some of the introduced species as predators. Jason's going to know a bit more than me on this one, but it is worth mentioning because the giant gecko, which is native here to the island, appears to be unfazed by a lot of these introduced species, whereas the other species of gecko and skink seem to be suffering considerably to the point of extinction. So that's certainly been a key issue for research. With I don't think any hard answers have been found yet.
No, there's been some recent stuff done with some PhD work, and not yet finished at the moment. But it was I remember helping out with a few of the studies and stuff, and we were doing sort of scent trials with the giant geckos, and I've personally gone out and seen giant geckos being eaten by like a large giant gecko, which is quite a big species, being eaten by a giant centipede, and also being eaten by the wolf snakes as well. So they're still being preyed upon, but yet they do have quite abundant numbers in areas where these pest species are also found. And the scent trials that we sort of were trying to accomplish was with like the wolf snake, the centipede, and the black rat as well. And it seemed at the time the sample size was difficult to get a large sample size, but we found that I think mostly from my memory, they only sort of reacted to the rats, and they sort of just done their normal thing around sort of centipede scent, and unless it was a sort of threatened wolf snake that let off its pungent smell, they didn't really have any sort of movement towards or from it. So, but it was a difficult study to do, especially when you're trying to put together something like this on the island. You need large sample sizes. You need very, very like lab conditions, really good lab conditions to perform these things, as well as the sample size. And that's a really, really difficult thing to get here. I mean, to go out and collect 20, 30 or 40 of black rats and giant centipedes and wolf snakes and giant geckos as well, and keeping them rotated so they're sort of still in their natural state without being starved or lack of water or anything like that, and still keeping a sterile environment. It just brought on quite a few issues.
To give you an idea.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. That's a huge collection of animals to store together for a single study as well, and especially on an island like that, it's not necessarily any easier.
To give you an idea of some of the sample sizes that some scientists are requesting for the blue-tail skinks, there's some upcoming research looking at basically like sort of population dynamics between centipedes, rats, wolf snakes, red crabs, skinks. They're wanting to do sort of like set up enclosures with various proportions of different native and introduced species, and then look at the interactions between these in a community sort of basis. And they're sort of looking in the order of 900 blue-tail skinks for this study. So when you look,
hey, whatever it takes to get to statistical significance, you got to get those p-values down.
Pretty much. So when you're looking at those kind of sample sizes being requested to do scientific research here, I mean, we've only got 1,500, and they're asking for 900 of those studies. So, yeah, getting to the sort of sample sizes that are required for some research, obviously not all requires that much, but for some research, it's just not really an option, or at least not easily accommodated for.
Well, look, that's always some of the issues with working with small populations, right? It's always going to be hard to get, the right amount of samples, whether it's, observation counts or actual tissue data for genetic sampling. It's always going to be a challenge when you've got less of that tissue running around to chase down and catch.
Especially when the species is already extinct in the wild, it becomes a whole lot harder.
Yeah, you have to breed them first, so you've got enough to work with. Wow, guys, we've gone over an hour here. This is that's pretty much our time done for the night. Thanks so much, guys, for joining us. This has been really awesome. I wish we could keep going. I'm sure if you guys are ever in town and keen to talk about this more, you're more than welcome back on the show at absolutely any time. Yeah, cheers. Much appreciated, guys.
No worries. There's definitely more to talk about. There's no doubt about that.
Oh, absolutely. And Jason, we can see you at Wildside Australia on Facebook, Twitter, and more. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. And you probably see my face pop up on the Parks Australia Facebook page as well every now and then.
Awesome. And guys, go check out Swell Lodge. That's SWELLLODGE on Instagram as well. And Ham Wildo to see all of Hamish's Instagram adventures with lionfish and sharks and all the other fun stuff that he's doing there on the island. Also, don't forget RepX Brisbane Reptile Expo coming up on the 25th of March 2018 in the Brisbane International Convention Centre at Brisbane Showgrounds. That's 1,700 metres squared of amazing native reptiles, invertebrates and bird displays to come and explore. Guys, that's our show for the day. Thank you so much, Jason Turl and Hamish Noller, for joining us. Guys, I hope we can talk to you again very soon. Hamish, when are you back in the country, my friend?
2nd of March, I'll be back.
2nd of March. And Jason, are you staying on the island a little bit longer, or are you heading back into the mainland sometime yourself?
I get off for a holiday probably once a year or so, but other than that, I'll be here for a bit. It's too good.
All right. Wonderful. Well, look, if you're ever keen to talk more Christmas Island, we'd love to have you on again, guys. There's plenty more wildlife cake and cocktails on the way. That's our show for today. Cheers, guys. We'll talk soon.
Thanks.
Bye.
Yeah.